Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Hi, I'm Tom Kulju. I am a Flint Knapper, and today we're going to make a stone point. I'm going to get out some of my tools, my moose hide leg pads. These are called copper boppers. I use copper pipe caps filled with lead. I have an abrading stone, a hand pad, a notching tool, a file, an ishi stick, a pressure flaker, and tape. First of all, I'd like to talk about the ishi stick. This is spelled I-S-H-I. It's a very interesting story. Back in the early 1900s in California, they were on a mission to annihilate all the American Indians. And one day, an American Indian wandered out of the woods, just about starved to death, and the sheriff found him hiding in someone's barn, and his name, he told them his name was Ishi. And thanks to him, flint knapping is not a lost art. This stick was his most important tool. He had a long piece of antler sharpened to a point, and he would put a nail in it. And he basically reintroduced us to flint knapping. It is well worth looking up the history on it. We'll start out, here's a piece of navaculite. This is called eagle feather navaculite because it's black and white. This is heat-treated material from Arkansas, and I'm going to try and make a nice little blade out of it. First of all, I'm going to take off all the sharp edges. This is called a spall. It's a chunk knocked off a much larger rock. I'm abrading the edges to take the sharpness off, make those edges strong enough that I can hit them. And I'm going to hit them with my copper bopper. See how that edge crushed? That edge wasn't strong enough. So I'm going to go back here and try it again. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Nice, thin, large flakes taken off that rock. And if you'll notice, when these flakes come off, they have a curved shock wave pattern to them, and that is necessary in order for a rock to be knappable. Also, they have what's called a bulb of percussion. It is a Hertzian cone that forms on impact, and a perfect example of this is when you shoot a BB through a window glass. It always makes a round cone, and that cone is always 135 degrees. When I hit this stone, this is my direction of impact. It drove the flake off, and it made this bulb of percussion. And what that bulb of percussion is part of a Hertzian cone. And a Hertzian cone is critical to flint knapping in the fact that a Hertzian cone always breaks in 135 degrees. If you shoot a BB through a plate glass window, it makes a little hole and it flares out 135 degrees into a perfect circle, and this is one part of that perfect circle, and that's what makes it possible for us to flint knap, because always a Hertzian cone is 135 degrees. So if I hit this and my point of impact is here, I know that cone is going to break off at this angle. Once it gets past a certain point, the energy flares out and it will change, but I know that it will always go that direction. So by changing my angles and my point of impact, I can change how the way I take my flakes off the rock. Each flake will always come with that bulb of percussion. It may crumble like that one did. I may not have proof of it every time, but it is always there. Bulb of percussion. Flint knapping is basically geometry at its oldest. 10,000 years ago, they were using angles to make arrowheads. Now I'm abrading to make this edge strong, because if I didn't abrade, I would hit that edge and it would be like hitting a tiny sliver of glass, and I would just crush it. So when I abrade it and round it off, I make it strong enough that it can carry the force of that blow into the material. And what I'm doing now is I am creating what is called a platform. Platform is where I strike the stone. And if I can create a convex platform all around this, I can basically do just about anything I want to this rock. One of the other rules of flint knapping is that you cannot knap into a concavity, into an inside curve. So right here is a concavity. If I hit this here, the flake will go this far and snap off, and will leave what I call a step fracture or a hinge. Now see, what I'm doing is I'm trying to have a nice lens shape to this rock when I'm all done. I want it to look like the center of a cat's eye. And then I take flakes off as I need to shape and form the rock. And then I take all these little micro fractures and bust them off the rock with my abrader to make that edge strong enough so I can hit it. And I support my rock, so I dampen the energy so I don't create more damage than I want. The number one rule is safety is you always wear eye protection. One of those tiny little flakes would go in your eye, and then you would be done flint knapping forever. You'll see how I supported that? I had my finger on the tip, and I had my fingers along the side to dampen those shock waves so I don't snap this in half. I work on a tarp so I can collect all my flakes. This is called débitage. It's a French word for the flakes produced from manufacturing stone tools. And if I just go out and work in an area and I leave these flakes on the ground, 20 years from now they'll have a weathered patina on them. And if somebody were to stumble across that area, they would not be able to tell that I left them there. They might think that they were hundreds and hundreds of years old. They might think it was an ancient relic site. And so I collect all my flakes to discourage that. I'm a firm believer that you should not falsify any of your work when it comes to lithic technology. I make a lot of blades and arrowheads. I sign them all and I date them, so if somebody comes across them, they know that they're not old material, because a lot of people will get a modern arrowhead and they will patina it and then sell it as old, and that's not right. And I don't want to misrepresent the fact that this is a modern stone tool. I have a basic shape on this side of the stone. I'll take a couple tiny flakes off here, and then we'll flip this over to the other side. See if we can't get more of that lens shape on this side. I use the moose hide on my leg so I don't do any damage to the veins in my leg from the pounding. This is not a real heavy tool, but it probably weighs a half a pound, and the constant pounding against your leg will cause permanent damage to the veins in your legs. So by using this pad, it's another safety aspect of flint knapping. It keeps me from doing vascular damage to my legs. See how nice those flakes come off of there? If you prepare your platform right, you just jump right off of there. Oh, this flake fractured a little bit, but you can see how they come off. They start at a point of origin and they start to flare out right away. If you have a flat area, they will flare out really fast. If you have a ridge for that energy to follow, like I try and work ridges because ridges are stronger. If you have a ridge that they'll follow, that flake will follow down a ridge before it fans out, before the energy starts to dissipate. What I'm doing here now is just nibbling away a little bit to get a little better shape. So I have to start pretty soon thinking about the shape that I want this to be. Some of the different types of material have fracture characteristics that make them unbelievably sharp, like obsidian. Obsidian fractures down to the micron level, 2 to 3 microns, somewhere in there I believe. And they've discovered that instead of cutting and tearing the skin like a scalpel does, if you use a piece of obsidian to make an incision, it actually separates the cells and you heal much more comfortably and much faster. So they've used it for eye surgery and they've used it for initial incisions for heart surgery patients. Extremely sharp, extremely plentiful, and they're discovering many, many new uses for ancient technology. Notice my support. I'm dampening the stone, and I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the stone, but I just have my fingers under there for support to kind of dampen those shock waves. And another thing I've found out that's very interesting, if you take this hand, you can close your eyes and it knows where this hand is. And you can put your fingers together with your eyes closed, any one of them. Okay, you can use that to your advantage in flint knapping. Okay, this hand knows where this hand is, but this hand doesn't know where this bopper is. So if you give this hand a point of reference from this hand, I touch that stone with the tip of that, it tells this hand where this hand is and provides my aim. Oh, too bad, so sad. Now we gotta start over. This is one of the perils of flint knapping. This appears to have an internal fracture. See this ledge here? It doesn't appear that I struck it too high above center line, which would break it in half. It appears to be an internal fracture, but that's one of the hazards of flint knapping. Now instead of a nicer big blade, I have the potential for 2 smaller arrowheads, and that's okay. It keeps you humble, it keeps you focused, and you know, it's all part of the game. If it was without its challenges, there would be no reason to do it. So we'll start again with a spall off of a large piece of Texas rock. This is Texas root beer flint. This you can see this is just a small piece off of a very large piece of rock. This cortex all has to come off. See how thick it is? That's very soft, energy absorbing material. It's very, very crumbly. It comes from years and years and years of being in the ground. Minnesota's not real conducive to material large enough to work. There's a lot of workable material in Minnesota, but the glaciers were very unkind to us. They fractured a lot of the material up into such small pieces that it's not feasible to work it. You just wouldn't end up with a big enough knife blade or arrowhead or scraper. So most of my material is imported. Southern Minnesota has a little bit of rock, and southwestern Wisconsin has rock. Hickston quartzite is one of them, and there's a Prairie du Chien chert that works pretty well, but it's hard to come by. Okay, I'm zigzagging around the edges, working my way around and trying to get that lens shape that I talked about on that previous piece. Trying to get all this cortex off. Cortex is not my friend. It eats energy, and I want that energy to travel across the rock. Okay. I have an opportunity right now to take this large lump out of here, and I'm going to take it. I'm going to prepare my platform really well here, and I want to shoot that flake down this ridge, and I want to take a major portion of that hump out of there. You see how that took? I reduced the thickness of that rock by almost 1/4 of an inch with just that one hit. Different techniques that a person learns along the way to take different flakes off. If you have to take a flake off from the end the long way, you want to support it the entire length, hold it a little differently, swing a little differently. It makes a big difference. That was a very nice flake. See that large flake come off there? It took a lot of mass out of that stone. It was just what I was hoping would happen. Straightening, smoothing out as we go. There we go. That's looking good. Okay, now we go on to the next stage, pressure flaking. I'm going to braid my edges really strong all the way around. And what I want to do with my pressure flaking is do a little straightening. Anything on this side of the center, I want to take off on this side. Anything on this side of the center, so I have a nice straight edge when I go down. So I start with my ishi stick, and I'm going to sharpen that. I'm just using copper wire inside my ishi stick, and you can use a antler tip or a stick with a piece of ivory embedded in it. And what I'm doing is I'm catching this edge with that copper, and I'm pressing, I'm pushing in, loading up, and then I use my legs to create enough force to just snap flakes. And the flakes are coming off exactly like the large flakes. I don't know if you can zoom in on it, but there's a bulb of percussion on there, just like the big flake. I'm skipping over the spots that are more to the outside edge of that because I want to straighten this edge out. I don't want to just go down the edge as such. Your best bet to learn is to go to a nap-in, and a nap-in is a gathering of arrowhead makers. And it's spelled K-N-A-P-I-N. And they're all over the country every weekend. braiding across here that tells me where the high points are. Here, 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 here. And those are the ones I'm taking off right now. That'll help us straighten this edge out even more. This one's going to become a knife, maybe a corner tang knife. Corner tang knives are kind of cool. There's a debate on whether they were hafted to a stick or an antler, or if they were just tied with a leather thong and tied around your wrist. I am a believer of the latter. It makes more sense if you're in a butchering situation and you're bloody and your hands are slippery. It would be nice to have a knife attached to your wrist. It's hung on a short cord, and then you would just reach down and grab it, and then you'd let it go, and it would hang on a cord, and you'd grab it again, and it would be held like this. And I've used them that way, and they're very, very functional.
If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org. If you have segment ideas pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund by the vote of the people on November 4th, 2008.